Welcome to this year's Halacha Shir on Sukkah. The title is Correct Directions for Waving the Lulav. If you've got the handout, please email me at j.golker@gmail.com. I'll send you the handout. The starting point is the Gemara in Sukkah. Please look at the first box. The Gemara says in Sukkah Lamed Zayin. The first question is, why do we wave? When we shake the Lulav, we shake it in all directions? What's that all about? I have noticed over the years that people do all different interesting things, and sometimes they don't always shake in the halachically correct way. So that's really what we're going to try and achieve today. Reasons for why we wave the lulav in different directions, what that's based on, and the different opinions about which direction we wave and what is the contemporary practice in different communities. So let's take a look. Says the Gemara in Sukkah Lamed Zayin on the base. Omer Rabbi Yochanan, Moilech umevi, when you shake the lulav, after you take the lulav and you make the bracha, you then shake it. Moilech umevi, you bring it backwards and forwards. Lemi shahar baruch shaloi, in the four directions of the world, forwards, backwards, right and left, north, east, south, west, to acknowledge Lemi shahar baruch shaloi, to who the four corners of the world belong, i.e. to acknowledge HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence. Ma'ale omorid, you then do it up and down. Lemisha shemayim v'aretz shaloi, to recognize that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has dominion in the heavens and on the earth here. But that's the first opinion. So it's almost like a recognition of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence in all four corners, plus up and down. But Ma'arava masnuhachi, in the west, i.e. in Eretz Yisrael, they learnt, Omer Rabbi Chama bar Ukva, Omer Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Chanina, Meilech umevi, you know why you wave it backwards and forwards? Kedei la'artzo ruches rois, to prevent the dangerous and bad winds that are blowing in the world. And Ma'ale Omerit kedei la'artzo tzlolim roim, to stop the bad or harmful dews that are in the world. That's what the Gemara says. Now, the Aruch HaShulchan, in Tov Reish Nun Aleph, Sif Chof Gimel, the next box, he brings both of these opinions and elaborates a little bit on them. Says the Aruch HaShulchan, Hananuim heim l'shisha ketzoves, the directions in which we wave the lulav are 6. Dalad ruches, the 4 directions, umale umata, and then up and down. V'ha'inyan hu, and the idea is this: the meilech umevi, you're moving the lulav backwards and forwards, lemi sha'aba rucha shelai, to acknowledge that you're doing it for the benefit, if you like, of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who is in all directions, ma'alo mata, and up and down, lemi sha'shamayim v'aretz shelai, recognizing, acknowledging HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence everywhere. L'hoiros, says the Aruch HaShulchan, sha'HaKadosh Baruch Hu moishel b'shamayim v'aretz, HaKadosh Baruch Hu rules, has dominion in the heaven and earth, or b'chol ruches ha'olam, in all directions. V'oid, and now the second reason, kedei la'artzo ruches rois v'tzlolim roim, to prevent dangerous and harmful winds and rains and dews, koloma, which means the kol mitzvah ma'keves as hapronius, that every mitzvah that we do can prevent danger for the Jewish people, v'gam shirayim shal mitzvah, and not only the mitzvah itself, but even the remnants, the leftovers, the part of the mitzvah which is not ma'ake, which is not doesn't destroy the functioning and the fulfillment of the mitzvah, is also beneficial. Ma'keves or beyichud k'sha'esim b'simcha, and particularly when we perform these mitzvahs and the shiraim of the mitzvahs, the remnant, the leftover, the sort of subsidiary part of the mitzvah, particularly when we perform it b'simcha. V'lochein ato, and therefore now, shehizman simchosenu, when Sukkot, which is a zman of simcha, umekaimim ikka ha-mitzvah, and we're fulfilling the ikka mitzvah hanatila, i.e. by just taking the lulav, v'shiyore mitzvah shem hanenuim, and the subsidiary part of it, which is the nanuim, the shaking of the lulav in different directions, v'onumarim shemoisrim nafsheseinu v'gufeinu lashem, we're demonstrating that we're subjugating ourselves to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, la'avodo yisbarach b'simcha, to serve Hashem with joy, umimela shebizchus zeh yadzer me'alenu kol minei tzoros, and mimela, automatically we will prevent all different types of dangers, hamakunim, which are coined by the phrase ruches roim v'tzlolim roim. So when we say that shaking the lulav has 2 objectives. Number 1 is to recognize that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is in all 4 directions, plus up and down. And number 2 is to prevent dangerous winds and dews that could affect us. That, says the Aruch HaShulchan, is just an expression of dangers generally. So, when you see, sometimes, especially in Hasidic circles and other circles, where you have a Rebbe, or you have someone who is a Talmid Chacham who knows and is shaking the Lulav, and there are lots of kavanas going on. We get a little, although this is above my pay grade, and I don't know, a lot of it is very Kabbalistic, but you understand a little bit what's going on, because the shaking of the Lulav somehow can prevent dangerous times for the Jewish people. For example, in a shul here in this community, here in northwest London, I know of a certain shul where the Rav is a Hasidic Rebbe, and on Sukkot they have two start times. One start time I think is 8 o'clock and one is 9 o'clock. If you want to start at 9, if you want to daven with a Rebbe, you start at 8 o'clock, because his Hallel and Netilas Lulav will take about an hour, and therefore you daven with a Rebbe. You daven shachris with him, and during Hallel he'll get his lulav out, and he does. And I've seen it once, bits of it. I didn't say for the full time, but he would shake in different directions, and obviously there's a lot going on, and there's lots of kavanas. And if you don't want to stay for the whole thing, you daven at the 9 o'clock minyan, and they join together for Kriyas HaTorah after Hallel. That's what they do it there. That's how they do it there. But you see, there's a lot going on. Now, the next point is which direction. What is the correct direction for shaking the lulav? Now, this is very interesting. The Beis Yosef, authored, of course, by Rabbi Yosef Cairo, famous for the author of the Shulchan Aruch, he says in paragraph 2, Kosav b'tshuvas Ma'aril, he quotes the tshuvas of the Ma'aril, but it appears nearly, he says, lahakif derech yamin. When you shake lulav, you've got to go towards the right. In other words, you're in shul, so you're facing Mizrach. That's where we face, towards Yerushalayim. And therefore you face Mizrach, and then after you put the lulav forward, the next thing you do is you turn right. That's what we do as Jews. You always turn right. You turn right. So therefore the next thing you do is right, which is Dorim, and then Ma'arav behind me, and then Sofin. That's what the Ma'aril says. And indeed the Shulchan Aruch, unsurprisingly, because it's written that in the Beis Yosef, the Shulchan Aruch says exactly that in Hilchos Lulav in Siman Tov Reish and Aleph Sif Yud, Yakif derech yamin. When you shake lulav, you go in a right direction, i.e. Mizrach, you start off facing Mizrach, then Dorim, then Ma'arav behind you, and then Safon. And the Mishnah Berurah says, V'chein hetik b'divrei Chaim, u'b'chayei Odom, he quotes Achronim who say the same, Z'cheinu ha'minhag ha'poshet m'dinaseinu. This is the standard classic minhag in our Ashkenazi circle, says the Mishnah Berurah, that we do exactly that, i.e. you shake the lulav, you do it Mizrach, then Dorim, and then Ma'arav, and then Safon, and then up and down. The Hatam, the Hachachamim, his heroes on Tomish, a Tomit Tikach Esderech should be Yamin. And the reason is because Chazal always say that when you've got a choice, you're at a crossroads, always take the right. It doesn't make a difference if you're left-handed, right-handed, doesn't make a difference. Our practice, says the Mishnah Berurah, based on the minhagim of the Ma'aril, is to do that. You face Mizrach, you do it that way, then right, which is Dorim, and then Ma'arav, then Tzafon, up and then down. Now, just by the way, before we get on to other opinions, and this is where a lot of people seem to not, maybe just, I don't know quite why, but they don't do it quite right. What does the Mishnah Berurah say you should do? So how do you actually shake it? You'd see all different types of permutations. So look at the Mishnah Berurah. This is very important. Paragraph 3. Va'ata, and now. Asadeh b'ktsara, in brief, I will explain, Seder hananuim, the way in which you shake lulav. Kafi ma shenog b'mdinaseinu, as is according to our minhag. Seder hananuim leruchais yachze ponov lemizrach. So first of all, you're facing Mizrach. You're in shul, you're facing Mizrach as we do. The shidrei shel lulav letzat ponov, the spine of the lulav is facing you. V'yase gimel holchus lemizrach v'shloisha havois. You do 3 backwards and forwards, like that. V'hainu shemolich yodo im halulav mikenegdo v'halo gimel palmin. So imagine this is my lulav, right? So then I'm taking it, I'm doing it 3 times. That's 1, like that. 2, and then 3, that's how I'm doing it. 3 times. Now, v'nochen, and it's correct, shegam yichasches ba'alin b'shas holeches v'avo, haloch v'avo. In addition, when you're taking the lulav and you're doing it 3 times backwards and forwards, you should always try and shake it as well, so you get a bit of movement from the leaves of the lulav. And then you do that 3 times, backwards and forwards, trying to shake it at the same time. And then you do it to the darim, which is this way, to the right. Exactly like you've just done. But you don't need to actually turn around and face that way. It's enough to face Mizrach, to do it 3 times. 1, 2, 3, and shaking at the same time, and then just to turn your hands so that the lulav is now facing Dorim, and to do that 3 times, 1 and back, 2, and then back like that, shaking the lulav at the same time throughout. I should say that whilst you don't need to turn your body or your face around to the right, do make sure that you don't poke the guy next to you or mess up his lulav. Just careful how you do it. And certainly when it's Lamarov, although the Mishnah Berurah again says you then do repeat that procedure that way and then to the left and then up and down 3 times exactly as I've just done, but you don't need to turn your body or face around, but just take care of it. Okay, and then it's what he carries on. You put it over your shoulder, or maybe 3 times, like I've said, and then that way, and then so that's how you do it. Now, the Levush, take a look at the bottom box. The Levush says, he first of all quotes everything we've just said, i.e. that when you shake, you're facing Mizrach, you then turn Dorim right, and then Ma'arav, and then Sofon, and then up and then down. That's what he first quotes, but soon he's going to argue. First you face to the east, because that's where you're davening when you're making the bracha, when you're davening Shema Esra, when you're saying Hallel, or Panav leMizrach, you're facing Mizrach, that's how we do it. And then you do it leDorim, which is to the right, and then to the back, that's how you do it. Because that's the rule in Judaism, always turn right. And therefore you first go that way, that's the way you're facing, right, up and then down. Good. Etc. Avol. Ein nearly lefashakain. But says the Levush, I don't agree that's how you should do it. On the contrary, that's not how instinctively we do it. Because the Levush is going to say that you don't move towards the right, as the Shulchan Aruch has just described in the name of the Maril, but you move from the right. And therefore the Levush is actually of the opinion that you go Mizrach, he agrees that's the way you're facing, but then the movement should be from the right, so therefore you're coming from the right, and you actually do Tzofan first, and then you do Ma'arav, and then you do Dorim, and then you do L'mal L'mata. So in other words, you've got Machlekes. The Shulchan Aruch and the Mishnah Berurah, etc. are saying, you face Mizrach. Everyone agrees you start off facing Mizrach. You do it that way. The Mishnah Berurah and the Shulchan Aruch say you go right, which is then Dorim, and then that way, and then that way, and then up and then down. But the Levush says, no, you don't move towards the right, you move from the right. So you start off that way, and then you move from the right, you do that way, Tzofan, and then Ma'arav, and then Dorim, and then up and then down. Good. Now, then comes the Arizal. Now, I would imagine some of you daven in Hasidic shuls or in shuls where there's Nusach Sfard, and you are more accustomed to this. And that is based on the Arizal, but the Magen Avraham brings this. The Magen Avraham says, Uv'chsavim, Issa, that the order in which you do it is Mizrach, and this probably is more familiar to many of you. Mizrach, in other words, you do it that way, good. Then Dorim, and then Tzofon, and then Ma'arav, then Ma'alo, and then Mata, and then Ma'arav. So according to the Arizal, you do it differently. Does this sound more familiar to some of you? You're holding your lulav, you start off, according to the Arizal, as brought by the Magen Avraham, you do it Mizrach, then you do it Dorim, and then Sofon, and then up, Ma'alo, Mata, and then behind you. How many of you here do it that way? Yeah, it's more familiar. This is in more Hasidic or more Sfard shuls, you would do it that way. The Tur has a slightly different way of doing it, based also, but it's more similar to Arizal, but a bit slightly different. Now, so the bottom line is, you do it according to your own minhag, either according to the minhag of the Mishnah Berurah and the Shulchan Aruch, that you do it the way I just described, that way, then that way, and behind that, up and down, or according to the Arizal, or the Levush says the other way around, you move from the right, or the Arizal as I've just described. Now, here comes something very interesting. We have begun by saying that you're facing Mizrach, but not all shuls in the world face Mizrach. I'll give you an example. If you go to South Africa, which way are you facing when you daven? Which way is the shul facing? You're facing north, because South Africa is to the south of Eretz Yisrael. Or what if you go to Sfas? You're in the north of Israel. Which way are you facing? South. We are familiar with Mizrach because we are in the western part of the world, America, Europe, and that's where we face. Everyone knows you face Mizrach. It's just, but not everyone faces Mizrach. So here comes the question. If you are in South Africa, and you are therefore facing north, as you daven, which way do you shake Lulav? Do you still do it the same? So, this is something very interesting. The Shulchan Aruch and the Mishnah Berurah and the Levush would all say, well, you start in the direction of the Aron, and then you just go right. So, for example, the Shulchan Aruch till now we said, you go Mizrach, then you go Doron, and then you go Marov, and then you go Tzofon, and then you go up, and then you go down. So the Shulchan Aruch and the Mishnah Berurah would just say, well, exactly the same. If you are in South Africa, or if you're in Sfas, or wherever you happen to be, then you just face the Aron, whichever way you're facing, north if you're in South Africa, south if you're in Sfas, and then you just turn towards the right. So you start off that way, then you go there, and then back, and then left, and then up, and then down. However, the shaila is, what about the Arizal? Because according to the Arizal, the reason why you do it Mizrach, that way, and then according to the Arizal is Mizrach, and then Dorim, and then Tzofon, and then up, and then down, and then back, is for Kabbalistic reasons. So according to the Arizal, it wouldn't make a difference where you are. You're still going to follow exactly that code. So you could be in South Africa, and the whole shul is facing north, but you would still start, according to Arizal, Mizrach, and then Dorim, and then Tzofon, etc., etc. Now, I'll tell you something fascinating. There's a tshuva of Rav Moshe Sternbuch. Rav Moshe Sternbuch, we know well here in England. He was the brother-in-law of Dan Ehrentreu. His wife, the Rebbe Ehrentreu, should live and be well, is a sister of Rav Moshe Sternbuch. Rav Moshe Sternbuch is one of the great poskim of our time. He lived here in England, and then he was in South Africa for many years. And he's now the head of the base in Yerushalayim, and has been there for many, many years in Har Nof. But when he was in South Africa, he wrote his famous Tshuvas Van Hagas, many volumes of Tshuvas, amazing Tshuvas, and he writes there about L'chadoidi. Now this is fascinating. What do we all do on Friday night? We go to shul and we daven L'chadoidi. What do we do when it comes to Boi V'Shalom? We all turn around. So if I'm davening, let's say Mizrach is this way, so I'm davening and I'm singing L'chadoidi, at Boi V'Shalom everyone gets up, we turn around and we face Ma'arov, the west, because Mizrach's that way, so we face Marov. Says Rav Moshe Sternbuch, that's very convenient if you're davening in a Mizrach shul, where the whole shul is facing Mizrach. But the reason why you face Marov is because the Shekhinah is in the west. And therefore, if you are in South Africa, and you are facing Tzofon, then to turn around and face Dorim is not appropriate, he said. Because you should be facing Ma'arov, because that's where the Shekhinah is, and that's where you're facing. And therefore, says Rav Moshe Sternbuch, that's what I used to think. But then I changed my mind. Because, says Rav Moshe Sternbuch, I've got the tshuva there, I'm not going to go through it, there isn't time. But then, he says Rav Moshe Sternbuch, then I realized that that's only true if you're going out into the fields of Sfas, where the whole concept of Kabbalah Shabbos and L'chadoidi originated. But nowadays, where 99% of people are in shuls, and they're not in the fields bringing the Shabbos queen into their lives, into their weeks, but they're actually in their shuls, then you actually turn around to face the entrance of the shul. And therefore, whether you're in Sfas or whether you're in South Africa or wherever you happen to be, everyone just turns around the opposite direction. So if I'm facing Mizrach, then I will turn around and face Marav because that's where the entrance to the shul is. And if I'm in South Africa and I'm facing Tzofan, I turn around because that's where the entrance to the shul is. And therefore, he concludes that that is what one should do. But with regard to shaking the lulav, there would be a dafka mina where you are. If you are in South Africa or in Sfas, then according to the Shulchan Aruch and the Mishnah Berurah, you're facing whichever way you're facing. If you're in England, you face Mizrach. If you're in South Africa, you face Sofain, and you start in that direction, and then you go towards the right, then behind you, and then to the left, and then up and then down. But according to the Levush, it would be the other way around. But according to the Arizal, you would always start with the Mizrach and do it in that way, because that's Al Pi Kabbalah. Now, just one or two final things. There's a very important note in paragraph 7. Take a look at the Aruch HaShulchan. Veda. This is a saving grace. For those of you who are a bit confused and haven't fully followed what I've said, this will be a sort of comforting solace. Veda, says the Aruch HaShulchan, the kol hananuin einon ma'akvin. The order in which you shake the lulav is not ma'akev. It doesn't spoil the mitzvah. Or be'ezeh derech shenanea yotza. And whichever way you shake, it's fine. To ikri hananuim ein ma'akvin. The actual nanuim is a shiari mitzvah, not ma'akev. When we say we call it natilas lulav, we take the lulav and we hold it. You've done it. That's the natila of the lulav. So if you didn't, shake in the correct directions, it's not ma'akev, it's not the end of the world. But of course, in practice, we want to do it correctly. So how do we do it correctly? So the vast majority of us will just follow the Mishnah Berurah, and the Mishnah Berurah says, like I described, just to summarize, that you would hold it to your chest. You would do it mizrach, which means 3 ways like that. And the whole time you're sort of shaking it so the leaves move if you can. And then to the right 3 times, shaking the leaves as you go. And then behind you to the ma'arav, and then this way, and then up and then down. That's the correct way to do it. If you have a Hasidish or a Sfad minhag, to do it the way of the Arizal, i.e. you do mizrach, and then daram, and then sofein, and then up, and then down and behind you, then great. Here comes the interesting question. What if you're in a shul which has a different minhag to you? So let's say you come to my shul where I daven Ashkenaz, and you are of a Hasidic or Sfaradi stock, and you want to do it your way. So the consensus amongst the poskim is that you should do it the same as the shul, unless there is no clear minhag in that particular shul and people are doing it different ways, then you can do your own thing. That's generally the rule with these things. Okay, so just to summarize what we've said, that the reasons for shaking the lulav, the Gemara in Sukkah says, as elaborated by the Aruch HaShulchan, is very powerful. Number 1, to recognize that Kodesh Baruch Hu is in all directions, and number 2, to prevent and to abate the dangerous winds and dews that are in existence, which the Aruch HaShulchan explains is a kinui for all dangers. So there's something serious going on over here. Which way do we do it? Different minhagim, as I've described, the Shulchan Aruch on the one hand, the Levush on the other. The Shulchan Aruch says you move towards the right, the Levush says you move from the right, and then you've got the Arizal, and the Torah's slight difference with the Arizal, and then differences where if you're not facing Mizrach, for example in South Africa, Sfas, etc., as described. Okay, Mitzvah Hashem, we should be zocher to keep the mitzvah, b'shleimusa, and the effect of it, as described by the Gemara in Sukkah and the Aruch HaShulchan, should be mekuyim.